Hi everyone, I'm Jane at Rockin' Worms. Hope you're having a good evening. I was checking on my V bin, which is the red wigglers I purchased from V at the gardenandwormlady.com. And I had moved them from their shoebox into a boot box because they were reproducing very nicely and I wanted to give them more room. So when I was checking in on them just a little bit earlier today, let me put this over the way, I noticed that it's getting close to harvest time for castings. I had put in handfuls of cardboard shred in here a couple of weeks ago. Is on that video where I did move them to this bigger bin. I'll link that in the description. And they have eaten it all. So it's time to harvest these castings. The other thing I noticed is while I do have some obviously, still very good size worms in here, I also have more worms because they've been making with the babies. Here's a little guy right here. Can you see him? Okay. That I need to feed them, right? I want to add in more food. I want to size up these worms again. They do seem like they are getting a little bit skinnier than they used to be. And I think that's primarily because they've been foraging. Again, I haven't been feeding this bin a lot because I want them to turn the bedding, which is the sifted cow manure and the pre-composted bedding, into castings. Okay, so I want them to eat that and not so much just eat worm chow. Okay, but I do think it's time to add in some worm chow and get these guys back up to size a little bit, and again sift out some of these beautiful castings. Okay, so I am going to do this by employing the horizontal migration method. All right, so it's super complicated, so make sure you watch closely. I'm going to take the boot bin and dump it into my bigger bin and scrape this down a little bit. I will clean this out completely using my handy dandy cheapo $1 paintbrush to get everybody out of here, because there will be little babies, there'll be cocoons, and this will dry down a little bit more while I'm talking to you and setting up the rest of the horizontal migration setup here. So I'm just gonna set this to the side for a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just put all of this on one end, smooth it out just a little bit. Okay, and then on this end, I'm going to put in yummy food. So if they've been foraging over here and they don't have a lot of food left, when I give them this brand new food, they're gonna go yummy, yummy and come racing over here, if worms can race, over to this end and leave the old bedding with the primarily, castings behind, and then I'll be able to scoop the castings out and have very few worms in them. Okay, so this is breeder bedding, but I'm starting to use my breeder bedding recipe for all my worm bins because the worms just turn it into castings so quickly. And while I want to increase my population using my breeders, I also want to increase my castings. So I have castings stockpiled for when I start my new planting season in the fall here, because I'm in South Florida and we plant in the winter and the spring, and we basically take the summer planting season that the north has off because it's just too freaking hot here. And also, it's our rainy hurricane season, so we don't grow a lot during the summer. Okay. So this is breeder bedding, like I said, sifted cow manure and tabletop indoor tabletop compost. That's all this is. And this is just some of the newspaper that I had on the breeder bin mix, to keep it moist while I was storing it on the shelf behind me until I need it, which is going to be this weekend, because this weekend is breeder reset weekend. All right, back to this bin. This is good. Now, what I do want to add, because again, I want to draw them down to the food end as quickly as possible. I'm not in a super rush, but I want it to happen. I am going to add some worm chow in just to this end. And I'm also going to add in some of my amendments that I don't put into my worm chow, because I like to do it separately. And that's some eggshell for grit, some dolomite lime for pH mitigation, because just having live animals will change your pH balance and can have it slide down toward the acid end, which is not as friendly to your worms. So adding in some pH buffering agents like eggshell, like dolomite lime is a good thing to do anyways. And then I'm just going to put in a handful of the azomite, which has all sorts of micro minerals in it that the worms can start processing, and that way all this micro minerals will be more bioavailable to my plants when the castings hit my garden. Okay, so I'm just gonna mix this in a little bit on this end into the bedding. And the last thing I'm going to do to make this end of the bin irresistible to all the worms on the other end is I'm going to give it some extra moisture. Once again, I could be using molasses water. I still have not had an opportunity to mix up a new batch, so they're getting regular well water. If you have chlorine in your water, you need to let that air out for like 24 hours so the chlorine can dissipate. But since mine is well water, I don't have to do that. All right, this end of the bin is as attractive to these worms as I can make it. And again, hopefully with this end being more in a foraging stage, foraging meaning that they haven't been fed in a couple weeks and the worms are forced to, if you will, scavenge around in here and eat any last little bits of food that are in here. But you can see there is still food in here. So I'm not starving them out. Don't worry about it. They're not starving. They just might be a little bit more on the hungry side and eager to get into this food forest down on this end. All right. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take their paper covering that was on their bin. You know what I'm going to do? Let me see if I can get this a little bit more cleaned out here. Nope, looks like it still needs to dry down just a little bit more. I'll do that off camera because I do want to get all of this out of here in case there's any wisps or cocoons in here. Okay, so I am going to need a second sheet of paper. And here it is. Put that on. Get their little plastic covering. And I'm closing it up. Now, like I said, I will go back in and put the residual from their previous bin into this bin so everybody's all together. What I'm going to do next is give them 5, 6, 7 days to move their little worm butts from this end down to this end, and I'll see how that's going. And I do that simply by checking in. If I have still a lot of worms down this end, what I might decide to do is keep this and open by folding this all back. So this can also dry down, which will add an extra incentive for the worms to move to this end of the bin where it'll be more moist because it's under the cover. But let's give it a chance to see if just having more food readily available on this desired end of the bin works, okay? Let's take it in steps. All right, so this bin is ready to go. Like I said, I'll check in on it in another, 5, 6, 7 days and see how the worms are progressing in the horizontal migration. All right, that's it for tonight. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for watching. Please think about liking and subscribing. I really appreciate it when you do. And I am yours in the dirt, Jane.